Hello and welcome back to Next Gen New Mexico, the show where we break down the issues that matter most in New Mexico and beyond. From Albuquerque, I'm your host, Joshua Neal, and today we're diving into one of the most controversial bills making its way through the Roundhouse, the Paid Family Medical Leave Bill. At first glance, the idea sounds great. Paid leave for workers who need time off for family or medical reasons. But what's the real cost? For small businesses already struggling to stay afloat, this could be the breaking point. If passed, this bill would create a government-run program that forces employers and employees to pay a new tax that would fund a new program that dictates how time off is granted, taking the decision out of the hands of businesses and putting it in the hands of the state. To help us break all this down, I'm honored to have with us today State Representative Rebecca Dow, a strong advocate for pro-business policies and a former candidate for governor. Representative Dow has been a fierce voice against government overreach and understands firsthand the impact this bill could have on New Mexico's economy. Representative Dow, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us today. For some of our listeners who may not know who you are, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm from District 38. That is the heart of it is Sierra County. And then it's north of Highway 70, which is the road you turn to go to Alamogordo. And then the rest of the district is mostly the city limits of Socorro down 75. So it's a very rural district. We've got the Bosque, we've got Elephant Butte, Cavallo, a lot of unincorporated areas, Hatch, all down that valley where most of New Mexico's red and green chili comes from. So it's mostly agricultural, mining district, and it's where I grew up.
Awesome. So jumping right into this, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about this House Bill 11, which is the Paid Family Medical Leave Bill. And it's a bill that's been getting a lot of attention recently, but for many New Mexicans, they may not fully understand what it is and what it does. Could you break it down for our listeners? What exactly is this bill and how would it impact businesses and workers in our state?
Yeah, well, it's not necessarily new. It has been introduced before, and a lot of states, especially blue states, have passed like a paid time off for people when they have a baby, like a maternity time off. And that usually applies to adoption and birth of a child, and it's for the mother. And that's not what this is. This is a massive expansion of that. It's 12 weeks. It's anything at all, bereavement, if you've been stalked, if you adopt, if you foster, if you're chronically ill, if you're just sick, if you have bereavement. It's very, very broad, but it's different than a lot of states because it's a new automatic deduction from your paycheck. The employer pays a contribution and the employee pays a contribution, which I just can't even fathom New Mexico passing the largest tax increase in the history of our statehood when we are so flush with money. $11 billion budget. And this is basically a $500 million tax increase. I call it a tax increase. They want to call it a non-voluntary deduction, but it's another deduction from your paycheck. And you will also be double taxed because when you're off, you'll have to pay tax on that tax income. And I think what's more concerning than everything is how little workforce we have right now. Able-bodied young adults that should be in the workforce are not in the workforce. We do not have the capacity to provide this level of substitutes, if you want to call it, like who's going to replace the nurses and the teachers and the early care and educators, who's going to build the roads, engineer the bridges, and we don't have the workforce for this level, and I don't think the everyday New Mexican wants a new deduction from their paycheck.
So the way I'm understanding this is that it's actually a new tax that will be applied to not just business owners, but also to employees all across the state to pay for this new program. And the purpose of this program is to provide an additional benefit to employees that they could apply for time off in an extenuating circumstance. But the point you were just making, Representative, is that in this time off, which could amount to up to 12 weeks off, the employer would have to find a substitute to fill your position and do the work that you were slated to do. And the workforce just isn't prepared to be able to allow 12 weeks off for a huge portion of the population. So could you help to explain how would this program work? Would it be completely state-owned and operated, or would it be managed by a third party? What's going on here?
It's mandatory. I do believe the intentions are for it to be state run and operated, because I say that because there is a bill to spend $150 million to set up this office. And let me give you an example. When we started the Early Care and Education Agency, they said, oh, this isn't going to cost anything. We're just going to pull the people out of CYFD and just transfer those full-time employees. And other than the new secretary and her direct staff, there will be no new cost to the Early Childhood Education Agency. That agency now has an annual operating budget of $800 million. So, when they're saying they're going to start off with 100, I think it's like 130 some million is for the software and to set up the agency. That's not even implementation. And now it's going to have to be deducted from every single person's paycheck, and every employer will have to contribute. I look at it this way. New Mexico's got too much government. When you have to have a lawyer, an accountant, and a lobbyist to do business in a state, it's gotten too big.
Wow. So, Representative, I know that you in particular are very well connected with the business community. What are some of the things that you're hearing from the business community? Are they concerned about this?
Well, I mean, on top of inflation, on top of rising minimum wages, the paid family medical leaves, on top of paid family sick leave, because of our medical malpractice and our tort in New Mexico, how easy it is to sue and receive some sort of settlement. It's just so difficult to get insurance in our state. And this compounds the situation where an employer is responsible for meeting all kinds of state regulations around employment, training, background checks, supervision, journeyman programs. And it's just so difficult to even gain qualified staff and retain them, that now you're going to have a whole nother set of people backing you up in order to keep your business running. So that's probably the biggest concern for me, is the lack of workforce. There's not going to be new teachers or new nurses or new social workers or home health care providers. They're not just going to magically appear to provide the substitute or to fill that gap. If someone, it's so broad on the paid family medical leave that nearly everyone can take a full 12 weeks of paid time off annually if you're getting divorced. It's so broad, and you cannot verify. The employee does not have to bring a doctor's note or verify. It would be illegal to verify why they're taking off. So it's just the intent is there, and I think there's bipartisan support for some sort of expansion, especially when a baby is born. But this is just so far beyond that. It would be the broadest in the nation, which is what, MLG really prides herself on being the first in the nation to try things. Take something California did and times 10, and then she's like, first in the nation. So we remain dead last in outcomes. So it's not really working very well.
So I know you already mentioned this a few minutes ago, but can you explain what the difference between this particular bill that they're proposing here in New Mexico, how that is different from what other states have done?
This is not an area of my expertise, but when we've heard presentations, I'm actually kind of freshman again. I had a 2-year vacant. I wasn't here for 2 years, and now I'm back. So for me, this isn't an area where I've dug deep because it's not been assigned to my committees, but most states have about 6 weeks paid time off when a baby's born. So that's what most people have. And then there's sick pay, which we also have sick pay, sick leave in New Mexico. And in New Mexico, your paid time off is flexible. And for most folks, by law, the minimum, if you're working full time, is 2 weeks. And if most employers go beyond that. And so 6 weeks and 2 weeks of flex time, a little bit of sick pay is typical. This is very much an outlier, just like our medical malpractice, just like our civil penalties and the way our burden of proof is low. We have no caps. It's just easy to sue and get a settlement. So those two things are really crushing business in New Mexico.
I know that this isn't a new bill. Like you mentioned earlier, this bill has been introduced to the state house before in years prior. And I know that last year that this bill failed on the House floor by a very slim margin by a coalition of Republicans and a few moderate Democrats who saw that this would be bad for the business community and voted against it and killed it. But what is different this time around with this bill now that they've reintroduced it?
Well, those moderate Democrats were primaried, and all but one lost their seat. Now, I won. One of the moderate Democrats who was not primaried because the definition of a moderate Democrat in New Mexico is it's so far left. It's so far left. Like if they vote 98% of the time with the Democrats, we consider them moderate, and they usually get primaried, especially if it's on the issue of life, or if it's around like opposing trial lawyers or unions, or in this case, these people, it was such a bad bill for these rural areas, like they knew it'd be crushing for business, and they voted no because they're supposed to represent their district. So the difference is that 3 of the 4 of the moderate Democrats, I don't even want to say moderate, the Democrats who voted no lost their races. Now, I picked up one of those races, and so we're down by 3. Well, Representative Al Cohn passed away this is very important. He passed away in November, and a moderate Democrat was nominated, one person from both McKinley County and Cibola County, nominated the same name.
Now, what the representative is talking about here is the sudden passing of former New Mexico State Representative Eliseo Alcon, who passed away earlier this year in January, just before the start of the session. He had won his re-election bid last November, and before the session could begin this year, he had passed away. Now, in New Mexico, in the event of a sudden passing of a sitting member of the New Mexico House of Representatives, the governor of New Mexico is responsible for appointing a replacement to fill that vacant seat, and the appointee that she picks must be from the same political party as the deceased legislator at the time of the election. Now, if the district spans more than one county, meaning that it's this huge district, typically a board of county commissioners from that county will recommend a replacement to the governor. And that's exactly what the representative is talking about right here. These multiple counties in McKinley and in Cibola have recommended a single name for the replacement of this representative who had passed away earlier this year. Now, in this particular case, a name has been recommended to the governor by both counties. Both counties agree on who they want the representative to be, but the governor is delaying the appointment of this representative.
Now, the Secretary of State said they're an eligible candidate. MLG doesn't want them here. I believe it's because they're pro-life. I mean, she will sacrifice anything, crime, safety, economy, inflation, anything to protect the right to have elective abortion up to birth with no restrictions and taxpayer funded. So this gentleman is pro-life, and he also voted against paid family medical leave. Now, the Democrats have a supermajority in the Senate. They're one person away from a supermajority in the House. If this Democrat who would vote no on paid family medical leave is appointed, then the bill would be tied and tabled. And so they literally have left this Hispanic Native American district, I think it's House District 6, without a representative. We're going on week 3. They have no one advocating for their capital outlay, road, capital, schools, whatever the needs are in this district. They are left without a voice because this is how bad this bill is, that even with a supermajority in one chamber and one vote away from a supermajority in the other, there's still people who have concerns. That's a pretty bad bill when you can't just ram it through, because all the subcommittees are almost 2-to-1 Democrats over Republicans. And then the House floor, except for one vote, mine, I picked up a Republican seat, but a moderate Democrat. Now a second name has been submitted for that House seat, and the governor still has not appointed. So she has 2 choices, but they've both made it clear that they would vote against paid family medical leave. That's what that district wants. That's who the county commissioners have nominated, and they will not appoint. I hope they do soon, because it's just so wrong. And it just shows the hypocrisy of the progressive left, that here's this Native American Hispanic district that they say they want to be the voice of the underrepresented, and they are leaving that seat without representation so they can get their radical, just not ready for primetime bill passed.
Jeez, yeah. Talk about voter disenfranchisement, man. So I know that this is really an uphill battle here, but are there any talks behind the scenes of how to make this bill more palatable for the pro-business community?
Well, so there is word out there. There's word out there that a couple of the Democrats, I won't call them moderate, because our most conservative Democrats are pretty radically left. I mean, they're pretty far out there in their philosophies, but they are trying to find a compromise because they want something. And rumor has it, I'm not on these committees, but the rumor has it that it will be heard on Friday in Commerce. So I hope you give people a link on how they can get on and testify remotely, or even come up to Santa Fe. And if they come to Santa Fe, say hi. And so what I've understood is that they want to limit it to businesses a little bigger. Right now it's 5 employees and more, and all self-employed contract. If you're contract labor, if you're self-employed, you'll be paying it too. So they want to put some make it smaller. And then they want to they want to reduce the weeks, but I don't know what the suggested reduction in weeks is. And they want to carve out healthcare. Now, New Mexico is just an absolute disaster because whoever has the biggest lawyer, best lobbyist, biggest crisis at the time gets carve-outs. So right now, our epidemic in New Mexico is the rapid loss of healthcare providers because of medical malpractice laws. And they're pretty much uninsurable unless they're part of a large hospital or someone else with some sort of medical malpractice cap. And so they're talking about carving out one industry. Although this is absolutely detrimental to all, they want to apply it to the healthcare industry.
Are there any major economic concerns about this bill?
I don't know of a model that's been presented in New Mexico that would give us any competitive advantage, make us attractive to out-of-state businesses. When you stack the barriers from people don't have access to the types of homes that they would want to have for their employees if they brought a business to New Mexico. Education's not where it should be. When you look at the GRT, we're the only state in the nation that has a gross receipts tax. When you look at our capital gains and our corporate tax and you stack liability, the New Mexico Civil Rights Act, when you add all these things together, this is not a place where it's easy to attract business. The businesses we're attracting are literally being bribed, like we are handing them money, hand over fist to get them to come to the state. And usually when the incentive to come sunsets, that business leaves.
So I know we've talked about a lot of things these last few minutes. If there were one or two things that you think every voter needs to know, what would that be?
I think what you need to know is that it is the largest tax increase in the statehood of New Mexico, over $1 billion, coming directly from your paycheck or from your employer's contribution. So it's a combination of both. It's not or, it's both. If you don't want a new tax on your paycheck, you don't want a new deduction, then you need to vote no. And of course, if you are a grocery store with a 2-point margin, most grocery stores' profit is 2%. That's about the margin of their markup. So if they have a new employee deduction and a new employer contribution, then your groceries will go up, period. That's just the way it's going to be. And every business that you purchase from, this will cause the cost of goods to go up by exactly the employer contribution, who has that margin to absorb?
So let's say that I'm a voter and I'm hearing what Representative Dow is talking about with this huge tax increase, and I want to do something about that. I want to contact my legislator. I want to learn more about this bill. What can I do to do that?
Well, there's a really important site called nmlegis.gov. You can go on that site. You can look up legislation by keywords, by the sponsor. So you can search things by topic. So maybe folks that are listening are really interested in education reform. They can type in the word education and all bills with the word education will show up. In this case, it's paid family medical leave, and they can put that in. It's House Bill 11. But if you type in House Bill 11, it'll tell you when it's being heard in what committee. Now, rumor is it will be Friday in Consumer and Public Affairs. You can go straight to what's happening. Go to nmlegis.gov, click on what's happening. It'll show you what committees are having hearings. You can watch the hearing, or you can get on the Zoom and you can raise your hand, in the box to testify. Each person can have up to 3 minutes to talk about why they're for or against it.
Representative, thank you so much. This has been absolutely fantastic.
Thank you so much for having me today, and best of luck with your podcast and all your efforts.
If you like what you're hearing, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, send this off to a friend or family member, and mark your calendar for next Monday. All right, we'll see you next time.